Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual But Not Religious Show. I'm your host, George Lewis. Glad you're here tonight. I've got a great guest tonight. I've got a superb guest next week. Listen, Tom Johnson, the producer of the show, has lined up a whole string of really good shows coming up. We've got authors who Wayne Dyer has spoke highly of and endorsed their book. Just some really good stuff that's coming your way. So be sure and tune in every Tuesday night right here. I want to talk with you a little bit tonight about the Spiritual Broadcasting Network and about the Spiritual But Not Religious Show, what we're doing, why we're doing it. The Spiritual But Not Religious community has become a huge factor in the United States. From what I understand, they did a poll, and as much as 1/5 of the population, 1/5, that's a huge number, declare themselves as being spiritual but not religious. But the problem is we really don't have any place to voice ourselves. We have no central gathering place, no community like, say, the Christian does. They have a Christian broadcasting network. They have a real podium to be heard from. We're kind of the unknown segment in the spiritual community, but that's not going to be forever. And so that was the reason for the Spiritual But Not Religious show, was to bring you those many diverse voices, and it's really pleasant to be able to allow for different voices speaking different truths, their truths, without having to condemn or argue back and forth about it, and to be able to allow each other our own personal belief and it be okay. So that's our purpose, and my whole thing really is about global transformation. When I see what's going on in the world, I know that we can't continue going on the way we're going, that we need to have some kind of a transformation. Having had a personal transformation of my own about midway through my life, I know that it's possible, one person at a time, to bring the world to a global transformation. Boy, this past week and a half, 2 weeks in Egypt, we saw just how important speaking our truth openly and making ourselves known and seen, what it can do about change. And you know and I know that we need change. And so that's the main thrust of what I do with everything I do, from writing books to videos to I'm working on a screenplay now for a documentary that I'm doing. And so what I'd like to do is invite you to join me with your voice. We have a Facebook page. We have Twitter. We're just really out there in the community and in real good conversations with everybody. So Tom will put up our Facebook address so you can come and join us. Right now I have passed the number of friends that Facebook will allow, but I've just established a new home. So send me an email or try and friend me, and I'll send you back an email on that. So my next week's guest is Scott Bond. Now, Scott wrote a book called Mass Deception. What he talks about is the moral panic in the U.S. war in Iraq. Well, you might ask yourself, why are we going to talk about that kind of a topic here on the Spiritual But Not Religious show? Doesn't sound very spiritual. Well, when you look at what happened there, and we begin to really delve into it, you see just how the sides believed in God, or were seeing this whole idea of God in their own viewpoint, from their own place, the huge part that played in all that. And there are so many things going on that I think I'm quite sure there are spiritual solutions for. And if we put our heads together in a think tank kind of a mode, maybe we can throw some things out there in the universe that will help speed that along. So I'll be talking with Scott next week. Very, very bright guy. He's a university professor, and we'll have a good hour with Scott. So be sure and come back next week. My guest for tonight, boy, I'm going to tell you what. The more I interviewed this lady, the more the more I researched for tonight's show, the more absolute respect I have for. The name of her book is Heavenly Seduction, and it's her name is Cherokee Billie Chainey. Now, don't confuse that with our other Cheney. This is Cherokee Billie, and she got involved with in the late 70s with a cult. As a matter of fact, I recall some of the stuff that was going on with that cult. Pretty amazing, and I think you're going to really enjoy tonight. You know, if you've ever wondered what attracts people, how do people get sucked into that kind of stuff, not just for a short time, some for years before they're able to extricate themselves. So we're going to have a really great conversation with this lady tonight. Matter of fact, we're ready now. Tom, if you've got Cherokee Billie on the line. Billie, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
I need to get Tom to turn my ear headset down, Tom. I'm up a little high.
Okay.
But you're
I'm about to go on, correct?
You're on, and you're coming through loud and clear and very good. Just for our audience sake, Billie does not have a webcam, so we're just going to get a picture of Billie up on the line. Listen, Billie, I was telling our audience, as I researched and read your book and looked at what you've done in your life today, the more I have come to admire your courage and your boy, I tell you, you've got some things going against you that most people would just sit down and give up, and you're far from that. You're right up there in the middle of the fray, and I just absolutely, you're in good company here, good warm company. I'm glad you're on the show.
Well, thank you very much, George. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be on your program and to share about my story in the Children of God, Family of Love, Family International. They change their name about every 6 months.
Yeah, I see they've changed them. So let's.
They're always changing.
Before we talk about them, the one thing I find that people really want to hear, Billie, is about you. And it's a good read, but there's a lot in this book, so there's no way we're going to be able to cover everything that's in the book tonight, and we just need to wet everybody's whistle. And I think your story is just hugely important here. So let's talk about you for a bit before we get into the book.
That sounds good.
You're permanently disabled and have been for a number of years. Am I right?
Yes, 21 years. I'm bedridden. I am horizontal.
And your monitor's on. Your monitor's on the ceiling.
Well, no, the ceiling hangs on a bar that hangs over my head, and I use voice software to type. And I wrote my entire book with voice software.
Well, I've used voice software. It's better now than it was. When did you start using it? It must have been a while ago, huh?
From the moment I had a computer, because I've been bedridden 21 years.
Yeah, well, it's sure changed in the last couple of years, but I'll tell you what a struggle that must have been to write this book. It's a huge job. Having written a book, I know how hard it is to do it with a keyboard, let alone trying to do it with voice software.
Oh, it was terrible. Voice software types more wrong than right, and you have to constantly go back and look at it. And, my family has all passed away. I have to be the sole support. I have to pay people to take care of me. And everything I work at, like in my book, it's all to keep me going and to keep me alive. It is, so I encourage people, please, to purchase my book.
Yeah,
We've got it up on your website.
They can just click on the book itself. It'll take them right to your store, and they can buy a copy. I really suggest they do that. It's a good read. So you live in the Dominican Republic?
At this time, yes. I had to leave America because I could not afford the cost of caregivers in America.
I wondered if that was the reason. How about housing and that kind of thing? Is it less expensive there?
Oh, yes, not less. There are some things more expensive, but in general, most things are less expensive. Of course, it is not America. It is a third world country. It isn't as easy,
Yeah.
to put it that way.
What kind of internet connection have you got there? Is it broadband or?
DSL is the best I can tell you.
Ah, boy, yeah, I had DSL. It's uh, nothing like cable, that's for sure. So
I have I
you,
have no idea what cable would be like.
yeah, your house there is it? I read in the book that you ended up with a house that had been owned and built by somebody who was handicapped. Is that the house you're in now, or was that the one?
Oh no, that was in America.
Yeah, that was here in the
I
States.
lived in Los Angeles, and that was a wonderful house. And yes, I miss it, but had to leave.
So let's go back a bit to your childhood. Your father was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, that's why I'm
It,
Cherokee, Billy. Yes,
yeah, and your mother, what was her heritage?
full-blooded Irish.
Well, that happened. That story's happened a lot. That's kind of interesting. Do you think that a lot of that was because back in those days they looked at the Irish and the Indians about like they looked at blacks for years, didn't they?
Oh yeah, very much so. And my parents were from the South, from a real small town, and yeah, they were treated real bad.
Poorly. Huh?
And they left there and never went back because of how they were treated.
And you went to where did they go from the South?
Los Angeles,
Right, and that's where you were raised?
correct.
I married a Valley girl out there back in the 80s.
Oh,
Yeah. I lived in San Diego for a while. I liked it very much out there. So
California is wonderful.
yes, it is. It's expensive to live, but it's wonderful.
Yes, exactly.
I lived in 1983. I lived in Pacific Beach in a very, very affluent neighborhood. I mean, it was wonderful. I was 2 blocks from the beach, big houses. People had money there. It was just, and it would all been really good for me, except I was living in my car at that time.
Yeah, that isn't too much fun.
That wasn't very much fun, but it sure started a spiritual transformation for me that's paid off over the years. So you were raised. What's interesting to me is that you were raised a Jehovah's Witness. Is that right?
Yes.
And your parents, was that a lifelong thing for them?
No, they sent me. They personally didn't go at all. They just thought, they were from a small southern town. They
Uh-huh.
come to the big city. They met the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they felt it would be a good religious, upbringing for me. But it left me an atheist by the time I was in my early 20s.
Well, there are a lot
Their
of people,
teachings.
Billy, I talk with who were Jehovah's Witnesses. Many people are happy, but I've talked with a lot of people that felt scarred by that experience. Of course, I've
Well,
also talked to a lot of Catholics that have felt scarred by the experience.
Exactly.
And a lot of
There's a lot of
Baptists.
religions. I didn't feel scarred from the Jehovah's Witnesses. It was just their basic teaching is that, if you aren't one of the chosen 144,000, when you die, you're just dead. There is no more, no spirit, no life. And I thought, why in the world should I worship a God that's going to do that? And I figured, to hell with God.
Yeah.
And that's where I became an atheist. That's why it was so incredible to my friends when I meet this man. His name was Gideon in this group. I met him in a parking lot at a shopping mall.
This was in 1978. You're what, 26 years old?
1978. And, I knew he was a Jesus freak, is what I called him.
Right.
And, but I was in a transformation of my life at that point. I had been for many years, like in the 70s, everyone using drugs. And I had been, having a partying lifestyle in Los Angeles, and had quit 6 months prior to meeting him, everything. And my friends were amazed. They couldn't believe I did it, but I was looking for something different.
Did you
and
go?
I
Did
knew
you go
that
to
that
any?
wasn't it.
Did you go to any kind of a program to
Oh,
just
no.
quit cold turkey, huh?
Yes,
On your own.
absolutely.
Good for you. A lot of
You
people
know, I
don't.
feel you can do anything if you set your mind to it, is my belief.
Well, I think you're right, but you know what? I'm not sure that these beliefs that we have necessarily stand for everybody. You know, it's
No,
like,
they don't for everyone.
you
Some
know,
people need assistance.
yeah, and it's like, and I'm not sure it's like a weakness of will or any of that kind of stuff. I just think that it just is, you know. So, so what, when you say I mean, what had happened to your life? Where drugs led you to the point when you met this man or when you quit? Were you working?
No, I had been seriously ill most of my life. I was born ill. And even though I worked, I reached a point where I became completely bedridden, not from like I am now, but for a long time. And I went to all the top Beverly Hills specialists. No one knew what it was, but now they do know what it is. It's called chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia.
Right.
And that's what I was hit with. And I was never able to work.
That's
You
chronic pain, isn't it?
Chronic pain and chronic fatigue. It's a fatigue that you can't understand. It goes beyond, when you've overdone and you're tired or you've stayed up late, you feel tired. But this fatigue goes way, way beyond that. And you literally just can't even move sometimes. The fatigue is that bad.
And you
can't get to the bathroom.
And you push past all of that to write your books and to. I see you're pretty prolific. You've written a whole lot of. I mean, not just your book, but you do a lot of blogging,
Yes.
and a lot of articles.
Yes, I write a lot of articles. I'm a spiritual advisor. That's what I do for a living, to try to make money.
Well, when you say spiritual advisor, that you're actually a psychic, aren't you?
Yes, I am, but most people think of psychics as scam artists and con artists, so, I kind of hate to use the name. But, yes, I have that ability.
Well, we've had quite a few psychics on the show. We've had some really top-notch people that are, involved with that kind of thing.
Yes, well, I didn't really work to get this knowledge. It just came to me, and I'm able to do it.
Well, what's
That's all I
interesting,
can say.
one of the things that's interesting to me when you say you didn't work to get this knowledge, you talk about, gosh, I don't remember what year it was that you had, after all of this had gone on, and you'd been in Jehovah's Witness, you'd been in the Children of God, and then you end up in a metaphysical church, didn't you?
Yes.
And thought you were maybe in a satanic cult there for a while.
Yes, because I was coming out of, born again Christian diehard, which the family teaches.
Right.
And I wasn't too sure, but the woman who was talking, who was the minister for the church, it was just common sense. There wasn't a condemnation of your life or you're going to hell. It was about how you're going to make it through this week. And I found it that caught my interest, and I kept going. I stayed for as long as the church existed, and I kept going.
Yeah,
in terms of getting how to be a psychic, I don't know. That just came.
Yeah, that's kind of a gift. I'm an empath myself. I've been involved with metaphysics since back in the, 72, somewhere, 71, somewhere in that time. So, back when you were talking, like when you were doing what you were doing, really metaphysics was looked at as being satanic. I used to catch
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
Yeah, so it was a whole different viewpoint from today. Before we get into talking about the man that you met who brought you into this I guess you have to call it a cult any way you look at it, from what I can see.
Because it is a cult.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about David.
David
Berg.
The founder.
David Berg.
Correct.
Boy, what a guy! I guess he was like. I don't know how far the accusations went, but accused of being an anti-Semite, pedophile. I mean, this guy was a bad guy.
He was. He molested his own children when they were little girls. And as it goes on, many okay, there have been other books written about the children of God, the family of love, and everybody's written their story, and some of the children that he molested have written their own books.
Right.
They were his own grandchildren. And yes, he was a very sick man.
Well,
and yet,
go ahead.
And yet he had a way with words. His mother had been a evangelist minister, and she was a very sincere woman. So he knew how to use all the words, and she had been feeding the hippies in the late 60s and taking care of them. She was very old, and he came there to help her out, and he realized, hey, I got a gold mine here of vulnerable young kids who are looking for something, and that's how he sucked them all in.
Well, see, that's the way of the pedophile, though. They got to find some way to keep feeding that thing that they got going. Well, you know, you take people like that; they have a charismatic kind of quality about them. I think that's isn't that how Berg, claimed that he was able that he had charismatic authority. I think God.
Yes, and that he was the end time prophet of God.
Right.
That was why he took on the name Moses David.
Well, I remember back in the middle 70s, and he was talking about the comet Kohoutek. And
oh, yes. I remember that.
Yeah, and he predicted, if I remember right, the end of the world by 1994.
Yes, that is correct. And, you know, that's the year he died.
Well, it was the end of the world. He predicted correctly, didn't
he? Yes, he did.
He just tried to include too many of us in that prediction, it sounds like.
And he did, unfortunately, ruin thousands of lives, thousands.
Well, there's still followers of him. And like you said, the organization has changed their name several times. Tell me, why do you think that, somebody who would predict the end of the world in 1994, and, they have the same thing with a couple other religious organizations that are still going, why would people still buy into what this guy had to say? This, like when none of that stuff happened. The comet Kohoutek didn't happen. The world didn't end in 1994. And yet what he says is gospel. It's law. Why do you think that is? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, he always had reasons that it didn't go through. That the Lord had changed his mind or things like that. And you've got to understand the mindset of the average family internationalist, they're called now, person. They are brainwashed, and they are like mindless robots. And whatever they are told to do, they do. Whatever they are told to believe, they believe. They do not question, because you are taught not to question.
Well,
and if you question it, that is a no-no.
Let's look at that a little bit, because I think that's a really interesting thing, and I'm sure our audience is curious about this. Well, when you say they're mindless and they don't question anything, I know as a child I was questioning. I've been questioning my whole life. What are the qualities? There's always as human beings, we want to know what's in it for us. Even no matter what's going on, the bottom line is it's like we do service because we get joy. We try and make $1 million because we think that's going to get us something. So what's in it for them? Is it lack of responsibility? What do you think it is? You've written a book. You experienced the whole thing. You must have some real insights that we're not privy to on a psychological level.
Yes. From what I observed, the people, they liked being told what to do. They did not want to think for themselves, if you can understand what I'm saying.
I hear.
They liked someone telling them, oh, you do this, you do that, and this is going to get you to heaven, and you are God's chosen people. You are his official family, and you are the elite. You are the ones who are going to lead all the people when the Armageddon and the whole Holocaust and the whole world blows up. You'll be the ones who will be the leaders because of your spirituality and all the sacrifices you make, etc., etc. That's how he kept them in it.
It's amazing to me, I think about what went on with David Koresh and You know,
And Jim Jones.
Jim Jones, that was even more. We're back on. Well, we
Well, I
lost.
think we took a ride through cyberspace there.
Well, we did take a ride through cyberspace. We lost our soundboard for some reason or other, but we got to back up. I hope that wasn't Moses David getting even with us. What do you think? Probably not.
Hey, I believe whenever I speak on this that there are spirits that try to stop me.
Well, I think you're right. We've had a couple of guests who are involved with the spiritual world. Who was it, Tom, we had that was... Anyhow, he warned us before we went on that we're liable to have trouble because he works in that realm. And boy, we had our hands full that night.
Yeah, his book was "Are You Possessed?"
Are You Possessed?
Wayne
Brewer.
Brewer.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because there is, one of the things I teach people is there are a lot of evil spirits. I don't want to say demonic or anything like that, but we are surrounded. Those spirits are all over, and I use protection upon myself all the time, especially when I work, because they will come after me.
Well, that just kind of sets us up for a good story that you tell. Tell us about Julia and the encounter of the evil kind. Very interesting.
Oh, you read my little story about my dog.
I read a lot of what you did. I found you very interesting.
Well, thank you. Yes, I had a little dog, a Shih Tzu, and I had studied that they were in China considered the temple spirit guards,
Right.
and they were treated royally. They never had to do nothing. Everything. Well, anyway, I moved into that house that we were talking about, the paraplegic house.
Right.
And it was beautiful and everything, and I had a living caregiver who was supposed to help take care of me. And from the time we moved there, Julia started going crazy, and I mean acting insane, to where she would try and just, everything would send her into terror. She would just tear at me, try to, get on top of my head, do everything clawing at me, crying, and I couldn't figure out why, except this caregiver was, scaring her by taking her out where there was big dogs by a fence, and I thought that was it, but no, it went beyond it. I couldn't even watch a movie on television, anything. She would go into a panic, and I was beginning to think that I would have to put her to sleep because she was uncontrollable. And this went on. Well, this caregiver, after a year, quit. And the moment she left, I don't know, Julia was so spiritual. She knew instantly, and suddenly she went to sleep and became quiet. But that night, spirits started going through that house. It was a large house. And I could hear doors opening, whispering, and I have encountered spirits for so long. That's why I didn't freak out like other people would.
Sure.
I just, protect myself as best I could and see what happened. And they couldn't, obviously scare me, but they were really trying. But what got me was I had another dog who, she had problems, colitis, and she would be in pain, and she would rock in the bathroom on her newspapers, and I could always hear when she would walk in a circle, and I would know she was in pain, and I need to give her medicine. And I kept calling her. It was like 5:30 in the morning, and calling her, and she wasn't coming. And I moved my hand to the left, and there she was right next to me. That's when I got angry. The spirits couldn't scare me, but they went and it mimicked my dog's illness. And that's when I got serious, and I did a whole ceremony to get rid of them at that point. And when I did, the house was cleared out. They did not come back. And Julia returned to being a normal, happy little dog.
That's the interesting part of that to me. You said you put some kind of meal around you in a circle. What was the
cornmeal and salt around myself,
and that's supposed
and just doing prayers that I know.
And what in the cornmeal and salt? The purpose that's supposed to give some protective barrier, or
yes, it can absorb negative energy.
So you're a naturopathic
before I became bedridden. Yes.
You're a PhD in that.
Yes.
Very, very powerful.
And I worked, doing natural medicine. I worked through a chiropractic office for many years and had a radio show teaching people natural health in the 80s when they didn't want to hear it. Everything that I've taught now, everybody now does it and takes it for granted.
You're doing a radio. You're still doing a radio show, aren't you? Of course.
Yes, not regularly, but I do a radio show from time to time.
This was a land-based radio show though in L.A. Is that right?
Yes, it was.
Not internet, so.
No, the internet didn't exist.
Yeah, I did a radio show back in the 70s on real estate, and then I did a radio show here in Sarasota for a couple of years. Tom, it's been a while since.
Well, with the land-based, you have a larger listening audience usually.
Well, it's just a whole different thing all the way around.
Well, that it is.
Yeah. So
the world's changed, but we started about cults on Jim Jones and stuff, and then we got disconnected. I'd like to go back to that because this book isn't just. It's my personal story of how I was seduced. That's why I call it heavenly seduction. I was seduced sexually by this man because I thought, he was in love with me.
Well, let's go back there to 78 then. Is that where?
Yes, we're back in 78.
You're 26 and you got this guy, Gideon Harper.
Right.
And at the same time, you're in L.A. You meet this Jesus freak, and this is the time that the Hillside Strangler, these two guys were strangling these women and scaring the hell out of everybody in L.A. It was a really tough time.
It was. And when I met him, I gave the phone number and everything to a girlfriend. We always did that because of what was going on.
Pretty frightening stuff. But there must have been. This guy must have had some kind of charisma for you to, go past that fear and.
Oh, he did. He had incredible charisma. Wherever we went, people would flock around him. People would come up to him and want to touch him. And he had something I've never seen in a person before. And he really had it. He had whatever that is. I certainly don't have it, but he did. And, it was as, I started to get to know him. Then he started telling me more and more, sharing, about the teachings of Moses David. And they were very interesting. I wanted to know about this elite group.
Before we go there, I want to kind of stay with this first meeting because I found it pretty interesting. He was there's a thing that they were doing in this Children of God called Flirty Fishing. Is that right?
Correct.
And that's what he was doing with you. Am I right?
Correct. It's called Hookers for Jesus, where Jesus said, I will make you fishers of men. And Moses David took that and said, you should sacrifice everything to get someone to Christ. And even if it means your body, laying yourself down on the bed as a symbol of Christ, of sacrificing yourself.
Well, it's pretty amazing that we're, like a guy like this can rationalize that kind of thinking and sell it. But when I think about rationalization and the power of it, I don't think there's anybody on death row that hasn't gotten their thing rationalized with some kind of a...
Absolutely.
Yeah, very, very powerful stuff. So you met, you brought him into your home, and he left you with a pamphlet, and what proceeded from there?
Well, he had given me that when we met in the parking lot, some pamphlets, and I read them, and I found it interesting. I'd never seen God written about in such a dynamic way. And
from what I read, it sounded like, that it was a man making love to a woman.
Yes, always. Everything Moses David wrote always had sexual connotations. And yes, it was like, how do I put it? He's one of the, I'll try to remember the quotation, your electricity turns you on. You just flip the switch and he'll turn you on, and blah, 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 that sort of language.
Right.
And it was like I'd never thought of Jesus as a turn-on. And I found it, let's just say it piqued my interest. I was like, I've never heard nothing like this.
Plus, that was really the language of the day too, wasn't it? It's like,
sure.
Yeah.
In the 70s, you bet.
Yeah.
Free love.
Yeah.
He knew how to use what was going on to his advantage, Moses David.
So.
And I just happened to hit right when he was really big time pushing this flirty fishing method.
Right. I understand they say they don't do that any longer.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
But I do not believe that.
Yeah, you think it's still hidden there.
It's everything they did was always hidden, and that was another thing. When I started meeting after Gideon and I got together, and I went to the family community home and met everyone, it was always very secretive. And I was always wanting to know, well, what are they, hiding? And I was always searching and researching, trying to get people to answer, because they kept everything very secretive, because they didn't want someone new to know everything, because they knew it would scare them off.
Right. So, the thing that you weren't physically abused, were you?
No.
Right, but psychologically, most definitely.
Very.
Yeah.
Very much. And I was brainwashed, and you don't think you are. That's the funny thing about brainwashing. You don't think you're being brainwashed at all. It's very seductive brainwashing, but it slowly does. And I was being brainwashed.
That's why brainwashing works, is because it's a slow seduction that you have no idea that it's even happening.
That's right.
And it doesn't work with everyone.
No.
No.
That's why not everyone ends up joining some weird cult.
Right.
And cults are not just religious. I want to bring that out.
Oh, no, there's sociological
cults. There's all types of cults.
Yeah, sociological cults and also theological. So, well,
correct.
What do you think was was your motivating force that allowed you to be brainwashed? I mean, were you
Well,
were you depressed?
I
Were you
didn't
unhappy?
think I was being brainwashed. Remember, I didn't think
Sure.
it. But I was looking to change my life. I had been living life in the fast lane of Los Angeles. As I said, I had stopped everything 6 months before, and here comes this man telling me I can be part of God's elite group. He knows that I'm one of the chosen ones, and I'm going to be a powerful leader. And, all of a sudden you're thinking, wow, I can serve God, and God is real. And I started, seeing God differently and not being an atheist.
Right. So it brought faith back into your life.
Yes, it
Which
brought
is very,
faith
which
in
is
for the first time.
very powerful. Were you lonely?
No, not really. But I was ostracized from my friends because they were still doing drugs and partying.
Oh yeah.
So in a way, I guess I was.
Kind of
But
cut
they were
off.
still my friends, but I wasn't wanting to do that anymore. I was looking for something different. And I didn't know what it was. And
Well,
I found this.
You sure found something different, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, leave it to me to find the most weird group in the world.
So Gideon played the guitar and sang to you and swept you off your feet.
Yes, in a nutshell, that's it.
Yeah. Well, and you married Gideon, is that right?
Yes, we did. We did get married.
So how long were you actually in the
Well, I never
organization?
really joined the family
Ah,
because I never fully bought everything. When I finally got to read everything Moses David wrote, and that was right before Gideon and I married, by this point, I had read everything, and I said, no, I cannot believe this man is the end-time prophet. And his teachings I didn't know much about the Bible, but I knew enough that it didn't feel right, and I also started memorizing the Bible from that point. I wanted to know. So I spent all my time reading and memorizing the Bible, and I was seeing in the Bible things that contradicted what he said. And
see, that's
I
the
couldn't.
thing I have the biggest difficulty in understanding folks who get caught up in this when the claim is there that it's Bible based, scripture based, but when you
Yes.
go back, it's it's contradicted through the whole thing. So somewhere along the line, people who are really immersed in that must want to believe that version.
Yes, well, it was Gideon who really believed it, and I loved him deeply. And
I
he was
understand that.
like, I was so much in love that I wanted, and I tried to convince him, and I did break him away as much as I could from the family. And I did my best, but I never could fully break him away. And so I never officially joined. I was joined because I was married to him,
Right.
if you get what I mean.
So, but at the same time, you actually did the flirty fishing yourself and used your body to bring men into the organization?
I tried it for a very short time, like I'd say 1 month,
Right.
and that was it for me.
Yeah.
Okay, but I did give it a try, yes.
Sure. I hear. I understand that.
I gave it a try, but I went, I can't do this.
What kind
It
of
just
effect?
felt wrong.
What kind of effect? How long had you been with him when that happened? I mean, when that
Oh,
asked
he
you to-
started pushing me to do it immediately.
Right.
He didn't give me, any time. He was pushing from the moment we met because he was so into it. But, he was a sex-crazed fanatic himself, and so, of course, he wanted it because he wanted me to let him have any woman he wanted.
So he was a sex addict.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. Of course, it's like being an alcoholic. Nobody can really diagnose you, I guess, except yourself. However, when you look at it, you may not be able to diagnose, but you can sure see the symptoms, can't you?
Oh, yes, and, again, he was having other women, besides me.
How'd you deal
And
with
he
that?
wanted my approval for it.
How'd you deal with that? If you were that in love with him, how was that on you? That must have been a bitter pill.
It was devastating because I couldn't understand what I wasn't doing that would make him love me enough to not want other women. But I was still in the belief that, maybe, the family is right, that you have to do this to show people God's love because, hey, that's what got me interested in God. So how was I to condemn it,
Yeah. Well,
So that was kind of how I went along with it, but not forever. I finally said no. After about 9 months of our being together, I finally said no more, and it's me or that's it, and we got married at that point.
And he stopped at that point as far as flirty fishing?
I don't know if he stopped. I think for a short time he did, but I could feel he was running around and seeing other women and having sex. I knew it.
How long were you married?
We were together 4 years.
4 years. So, and how about after him? Were you able to have a good relationship with anyone after that point, or?
No. I never dated again. That was the end.
Psychologically devastated.
Yes.
To get you.
And people asked how long did it take to get over it.
You're not over it
And
now.
I always answer, it's now, this year marks 30 years since I left him and the family. And I can't tell you if I know that I do not believe their teachings. They were wrong. But the effects of it always are there.
The fact. Listen, I'll tell you, Billy, the fact that this organization is still active, still sucking people in, amazes me. Let's talk a bit about Ricky Rodriguez. Did you know him?
Oh, yes.
Well,
I didn't know him, but, every week we were sent out, they were called the Dabadito books. That was his name, he was called in the family. And it was how, at that time, he was a child, and it was how you were supposed to raise children. And they, his nannies were molesting him. Of course, they called it giving him love, Jesus love. And they were molesting him from the time he was born.
Wow.
And he was taught to molest other children by the time he was 2 years old. And he was the son of Moses David's wife.
Right.
And he was brought up with Moses David, and right in the heart of it. And when he, in the year 2005, well, he left the family. He did leave it. I don't know, he just had enough. He had been abused and screwed over in his mind so much, he left.
He was being groomed to be the leader of it, was he not?
Yes, he was.
Right.
He was. And he left. And that took a lot of courage. But he couldn't, he left, but it's still what they'd done to him for all those years. It wouldn't leave his mind, and he couldn't get over it. And he decided that he was going to try to kill his mother, who was the leader at that point, because Moses David was dead.
Right. He died in 1994.
And he was trying to find her, but he did find one of the top financial people in the family, and he killed her, and then he killed himself. But before he did it, he made a 1-hour video explaining all of this and why he did it. And I understood, because the second generation, which he was, of the family, most of these kids are so messed up. They have committed suicide. They are drug addicts. They are prostitutes. They are strippers. River Phoenix, the actor, his family was in the family.
Were they really?
Yes, they were. And I believe that is why he was so screwed up and ended up in heroin and other things, because he was out on the streets passing out Moe literature, playing the guitar. Joaquin Phoenix was very young, but he was exposed to it. There's several. Rose Gowan She was on the show Charmed.
Uh-huh.
She was in the family. There's many famous people who were in the family.
Which is interesting because when one kind of like sucks other people in, and when you see that kind of high-level people, it makes it easier to make a decision to follow that because you think, wow, if they're in it.
Well, they weren't in it, River Phoenix, by the time he became a movie star. His family walked away when Moses David started the Flirty Fishing movement heavy. They left.
Right.
Okay. But the influence still was there because, I can't explain it. When you're brought up from childhood in a certain mindset, it's very difficult.
Well, I've worked with a lot of people, not a lot, quite a few people who suffer from incest, and it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. It does not go away. It's just it's a horror. It's just totally destructive. It's a horror, and people can spend the rest of their lives trying to find some kind of normalcy, and chances are
yes, like Ricky Rodriguez, and that was it. He said he couldn't be normal, and he knew that he couldn't continue to live. You can probably, if you look it up on the internet, find a video where it's an hour video that he made, and listen to him. I felt great sympathy for the guy, and I did write about him throughout my book because I had been hearing about him all through the family, and then I wrote what he did and what happened.
Speaking of your book, I want to remind our audience they can pick it up by just clicking on the picture there in the this week's guest. It'll take you right to her site. You're also on Facebook, right?
Yes, and you can just go to CherokeeBillie.com and look under Cherokee Store, and there's the book. I also did a video where I read the first chapter, where you can hear, how it all started.
You work with people by telephone, am I right?
Correct.
Yeah. Tell us a bit.
And I hear a lot of problems, people have been through.
Well, I'm sure you do, and it's like there's a lot of stuff going on out there. So let's talk. I think we've wet everybody's whistle on your book. At least I hope we have, because it's just an interesting read, and you're a really interesting lady. Let's talk a bit about. You wrote an article on preparing for 2012. And
12.
Yeah, and everybody talks about 2012. Give us your spin on 2012.
Well, a lot of people are saying that's the end of the Mayan calendar, which it is not. Okay, it's a certain point. I can't remember offhand, but it's not the end of it. It continues on for hundreds of years beyond. I think, though, that 2012 is probably going to be. This year, 2011, is a real turning point in the world. We see it all over.
So
right
we're
now.
seeing in Egypt going on right now.
Exactly.
It's huge.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg of what's coming. And it's going to be massive changes. And I believe that this year is a very high spiritual year, but people are being called to turn and really get their spirituality strong to face what's coming, because I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I don't think it's going to be very good. And I have even written an article about, preparedness, all the things you should have prepared to survive.
Tell us a bit about that. What's the laundry list there?
Oh, well, the number one thing is you should have like a duffel bag with, I call it a flea bag, where you can instantly pick that bag up, say, because of gas explosions, floodings, whatever. There's so many natural events occurring besides terrorists and everything else.
Right.
That would have food, some food, clothing, important documents, some money, and something so you could leave your house and be able to survive for a few days, without government help. Hurricane Katrina proved that you cannot count on the government to help you in a crisis. And I've written, it's on my website. If you go into the articles section, are your emergency supplies ready? And it's about how to do all this. And I take you through every single thing you should have, not only in your flea bag, but what you should have in your home. very much about being self-sufficient, having generators, things, water stored, everything, because there's going to be events that are going to be happening that you will need to be able to take care of yourself and not look to the government, because they're not going to help you.
Where does that leave you in your condition with your physical hand?
Well, I have quite a bit of that. I have it all pretty much together as best I can. And, if it's my time to go, trust me, I don't care if I die tonight. It does not matter to me, because I do know the spirit world, and I'm looking forward to being there. I'd rather be there than here. Here is nothing but a struggle day to day for me. And it's a miserable life, to be quite honest. I'm in constant pain.
I'm sure you are.
And it's very hard to make an income because I can't get out and meet the public. I'm only doing it through the internet.
Right.
And I work all the time. I write all the time. I put myself out everywhere all the time. I'm constantly working, but to get a client is very hard. So anyone who would buy my book, I'd be greatly appreciative. Or if you want my services, as a psychic, one of the things that I'm able to do, as I mentioned, I know spirit, is because I communicate with the deceased. I do that all the time, and it's quite remarkable. It amazes me more than the people I'm doing it for. Trust me. And I've seen the spirit world, and it's far better than here.
We've only got a couple of minutes left here, so I have a lot more I'd like to talk with you about. As usual, we get guests that are so interesting that we never get through everything I'd like to talk about. One thing I would like to know, though, is what happened to Gideon Harper?
I have no idea.
He's, as far as you know, he's still alive, breathing, and taking nourishment somewhere.
I have no idea.
Gotcha.
I mean, nothing, and I don't care.
We got one minute left here for you to tell me the one thing that we didn't cover that you would like to say.
If anybody comes to you and tells you that they love you and they accept you as you are in any way, watch out and run away and get to a psychologist, get some help. Don't listen to it.
Get yourself a therapist, a good therapist, a psychologist immediately. Well,
Yes.
these days, people don't really want the psychologist. They got to go for the psychiatrist, who's the local drug pusher these days. So.
Right, and no, you need a psychologist, not a psychiatrist.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, listen, Billie, I have thoroughly enjoyed tonight in our conversation. I wish you the best.
I appreciate you having me on your program.
Well, I wish you the best, and I hope we generated some calls for you. I'll be working at selling your book up on my website long after like you've gone to bed, and hopefully things are going to turn around for you really, really well. So we're going to have to say.
And if you ever want, I can come back on your program. We can get into this more.
We'll look forward to that at some point in the future.
You have a blessed evening, and thank you so much.
You too, Billie. Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a pleasure for me. It's nice to talk with authors who are really affluent, really making it, and they're out there. But there's another part of our world that people who do really good work, it just doesn't get recognized. You find it in the art world everywhere, and it's really a pleasure to be able to speak with that kind of person who's kind of hidden, but very talented and has a great story. So be sure and come back next week. We got Scott Bond, Mass Deception. We'll try and clear out the mass deception, see if we can come up with some kind of spiritual solution for some of what ails us. In the meantime, don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.